sing the thunder song.
Wait.
When you hear the sound of thunder, don't you get too scared. Just grab your thunder buddy and say these magic words.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Thunder Buddies podcast, special edition. We got national writer, USA Today, Sam Amick, out in Sacramento.
I am indeed. Elk Grove, just south of Sacramento.
The greatest place in the land. It's like we've talked about in the past. That's a good place to be stationed as a national writer because you get a lot. You know, obviously all these teams coming in. You cover the Western Conference, but it's a more informal setting to meet a lot of these teams at shoot-arounds, at practices, right?
Right, no question. It's funny, Anthony, because I started covering the league nationally in 2010, and it's changed quickly as far as I think how much it matters which market you're in, because there was a poll for a couple of years for me, like, man, I should probably get to LA, maybe get down to the Bay. But, you know, it's almost a microcosm or I guess another example of like the OKC effect. Like, this is probably a stretch, but like Kevin Durant, you know, can do his thing and marketing is not a problem in OKC, and the internet has changed the world. Everything's smaller. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're dead on. And then, you know, it's nice to kind of not have to fight the crowds media-wise being stationed here.
Well, it's really, it's weird. I think it's like almost perfect because you have the off-beaten kings that, you know, you can go to their shoot-arounds when teams are in Sacramento, get those guys. But you also have these mega games in this, like, the biggest team in the league right now, an hour and a half down the road.
Right. No, I mean, that's changed it for sure. I mean, this year, I actually wanted to go back and look at my hotel stays and kind of the travel that I've had this season compared to past seasons, because with the Warriors, you know, I mean, I'm busy as ever, but I'm not getting on a plane like I used to. That's for sure. I mean, you get in the car, you go down, and every Warriors game, no matter who they're playing, is a big game.
Yeah, I don't know how often the NBA schedule does it. It seems like they do it a lot with the Thunder, but you were on the Thunder beat. Now this would have been about 2-3 weeks ago. They had a game in Sacramento. You actually flew down to L.A. for their game against the Clippers, which was a memorable one, and then back up to the Warriors. I mean, you covered 3 straight Thunder games with me. How was the Thunder beat?
It was great, man. I always enjoy it. I mean, I enjoy the present company. I enjoy the Thunder folks in the organization. I enjoy the guys on that team. I mean, even, you know, as many hits as Russell takes, I don't think it's a good cast of characters. It's a good story. So I always enjoy it, whether it's usually like 1 or 2 high profile teams every regular season. It's not necessarily intentional, but I'll wind up doing something like that, just kind of jumping on the beat for 3 or 4 games. I did it last year with the Cavs when they came west, and this year with Kevin and his free agency situation, and just the fact that, you know, again, they're a good story. I did it with them, but it was fun. I had a good time.
The outside perception of the Thunder media-wise is like so hard to deal with. You know what I mean? Russell's Russell, and then Durant. Though, I mean, I've found him, like, this is probably his best season as far as, like, he's so open and willing to say controversial things and talk a lot. He's had those few dust-ups where he just kind of personally attacks the media a little bit, which has given him that angry perception where people think those 2 guys as the leaders are, tough to deal with. Then the organization, they just hear about how hard it is to get access. Obviously the Grantland story really intensified that. But you're around, you're national, but you've been around so much. I mean, where do you put them as far as dealing with teams compared to some of the other teams you deal with?
I think I'm in the minority from the standpoint that I've had pretty good luck with them, and I do have a good vibe and a good dynamic with all the kind of powers that be. And I mean, listen, every team's got its own personality PR wise. And so if you ask me about the Thunder and some of the things that come to mind in terms of their style, I mean, they clearly, they would prefer to know, like in a post-game setting or even a pre-game setting or a practice setting, and this is, starting at the top, and I think that's got to get pointed out. They would prefer to know everything, if not almost everything that's being said between the media and the players about their team, and that's a unique component. Like that's probably the most unique part of what they do. And
a lot of times I think they want to know going in what's the topics. You know what I mean? Like it's if somebody came out with a report that's like Durant's, he's giving the Thunder an ultimatum. They are trying to itch to find out if somebody might even ask Kevin. So then on the walk over, they can be, all right, Kevin, you're going to probably get asked this. You might get asked this. So you're right. They do. I don't want to say control the conversation, but like you said, from the top, Sam just wants to know exactly what's going on. You can ask whatever you want, but they are like monitoring.
Yeah, no, I mean, and listen, it's in their best interest, and then it becomes this kind of, it takes two to tango, so it becomes a back and forth with the media where if you push that envelope too far, like I think some people have claimed that they have at different times, then you have pushback, and then you have the media saying, now we're not allowed to do our jobs to the degree that we want to. But again, I'm in the minority. And that Grantland piece, to cite that example you made, I mean, that stuck in my craw a little bit. And this is going to come off as self-serving probably, but I think it's also true. Like, as you know, Anthony, that was the year where I did that piece with Kevin where we drove around Oklahoma City and he went to the governor's mansion, and it was really good access. And, I'd be lying to you if I didn't admit that the Thunder played a part in that access. And so, when I read this piece, I'm kind of sitting there going, man, this picture's getting painted that Kevin never does one-on-ones and those doors are never open. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it's a place also, I think this part doesn't get talked about enough where, and this is just me kind of spitballing, but in terms of the Thunder and what appeals or what's appealing about them to NBA players, I think some of these guys, the players themselves, like the fact that in OKC you can kind of keep to yourself a little more than you can maybe in a New York or Chicago or in LA. You're not going to have to deal with the crush all the time. I think that's something that from the Thunder standpoint, they're well aware of.
Yeah, their biggest thing is like, whatever the players want, the players get, basically, where like, okay, Russ wants to keep to himself. He doesn't want to do one-on-ones. They're going to go to him, and if they want him to do a one-on-one, like I remember earlier this season, I was doing a big story on him going to UCLA. Going back to UCLA, they were doing Russell Westbrook. Now, it was just a really good story because, I mean, this was a 3-star recruit, 10 years ago who's now like being honored at the most historic college basketball arena in the country. Like, that's about as feel-good a story as a guy would want. You'd think you'd want to do a one-on-one, but he's like, no, I'm not doing it. I don't want to. And they always abide by the player's wishes. Whereas if Enes Kanter or Steven Adams, whoever wants to do a one-on-one, wants to talk about a specific subject, they're going to abide by that too. They're going to get somebody to talk about the subject. They're going to they'll always go to the player, and then whatever they say goes. Like, they work for the players very much in this organization. And as you mentioned, I mean, I think they just view that as their, they don't have palm trees, they don't have beaches, they don't have all these free agency lures. They have the small market. Their niche can be, look, we just treat the players like incredibly. We have all these chefs. We have, any masseuse you want. Everything is just so catered to the players. And like, a lot of the veterans I've heard, like the Caron Butlers, the Derek Fishers of the world, even like Randy Foye just came in and he's already talking about like, wow, like they have everything laid out for us, that type of stuff.
Interesting.
So, I mean, I do think that's big for them and they know it. And that does create maybe friction as far as media wise or otherwise.
I mean, I think I think there's been a level of self-awareness too within the organization where, to their credit, at different points in time, they've kind of checked themselves and tried to reevaluate the way they do things, and they do listen to the narrative in the media, and I do think that stuff truly matters. Again, I kind of appreciate the fact that you even give me a chance to speak on this because I never really have. But for me, I feel like I'm in the minority. I've had, very good access, very good relationships with them, and I'm not naive whatsoever to some of the complaints. And I've had very candid conversations with the Thunder from Sam Presti on down about those things. So they're trying to do it in a way, I think, that it benefits them and benefits us. And, everybody learns as they go along. But, it's a good group.
Yeah. Tell me about your week on the Thunder beat. When was that? What was that now? 3 weeks ago? They blew out the Kings, although that was an interesting game because you had the Cousins, Adams stuff going on. There were some skirmishes, and then they go down to L.A. and, like, really look good for, 3.5 quarters.
Right.
But it turns into their worst loss of the season. They blow a 17-point lead. Go up to Golden State, second night of a back-to-back in Oracle after an emotional loss. The thing with the owner had just happened. That happened that week. Played actually pretty well in Oracle, but lost. So you're talking about, they go 1-2 while you're with them. Strange loss, strange things happening. That was a weird week.
It was. I mean, you mentioned Mr. McClendon passing away, and it was not that long, obviously, after the death of Monty Williams' wife. And that was the one thing, being around the team, that I think you have to be around the team to really get a sense of, is that we all get so caught up in the X's and O's, and are the Thunder as good as the Spurs and the Warriors, and what's Kevin going to do, and are they moving the ball enough? And then being around them for a couple days, and when the situation happened with Aubrey, I just remember sitting there, chewing on the thing with Monty and his family, thinking back, and this is to a much lesser degree, but thinking back to all the serious injuries the Thunder have had at key moments in their history. And it just kind of dawned on me during that little stretch that, these guys, there's a heaviness around this group on a pretty consistent basis, and never more so and during that time. I mean, that was bigger than the basketball stuff, but they've been through some things. You know what I mean? I mean, they just, in terms of just adversity and having to pick yourself up off the floor and try to take another crack at it and do it again. They've been through a lot.
Yeah. And then Waiter's brother died.
Right. Yes, that's the one I was forgetting. Absolutely.
That was
absolutely
4 or 5 days later. Yeah, it's for sure. But especially to me, like with all that stuff happening, it also happens in mid-February, late February, where emotions can kind of drain your game because, this isn't a must-win playoff game. It's a chance for you to sit back and think about reality, and you just may not come out with the same juice that you typically would. So it was interesting. But what did you overall, as far as court product?
Listen, same old formula. They, I mean, Billy is trying his best, clearly, to get certain talking points through and to move this rock, up the mountain in terms of changing the Thunder's identity. They have games where you see it, and the passes are flowing, and the passes per game are at a higher rate. But I've heard you. You were on. I forget with who. Man, I'm drawing a blank. You did a podcast with somebody that I actually listened to.
Was it the B-ball breakdown one?
Yeah, okay, it's pretty good. And the point that you made that stuck in my head, so I'm going to steal it, is that a lot of this stuff, during that stretch and all season long, reminds you that the Thunder personnel is what it is, and you do have a lot of guys with limited skill sets. Now, the skills that they have are tremendous, whether it's Enes Kanter or guys of that nature. But it's not, the Spurs and the Warriors, teams like that. I think the reason we're seeing the gap between, them and teams like the Thunder right now is because of versatility and more playmakers, more two-way players, and that bears itself out almost every night.
Yeah,
and so
I was going to say that when people say, two-way or versatility, a lot of times people's brains immediately go to they must be long, good defenders that can guard, or two-way, you can shoot it and you can defend it. But that to me is also passing.
Right.
Bogut can pass. All their big men can pass. Everyone can almost play every position, can bring the ball up, can really ball handle. And that is the thing with the Thunder. Andre Robertson, he's never handling the ball. He's not passing the ball. Serge Ibaka, everyone knows how robotic he is. He has trouble catching the ball, swinging the ball. Look at his assists per game. I mean, they're nowhere near most of the big guys in the league. Steven Adams. I mean, they're pigeonholed into their job. So then everyone suddenly wonders, why late in games it's all Russell and Kevin. It's like, who else?
Yeah, I know. And that's a problem. I mean, that was a good point by you, and one that had me almost feeling like, that's ultimately probably going to be the death knell for them. I think this season, I don't, and I'm just handicapping it, but I wouldn't predict that they're going to surprise the world and win the whole thing. And it just seems like they're having a very, very, very good year, but they're just an echelon below or a notch below the best of the best. And I don't know if that formula is going to work because, a couple of years ago when you were playing the Spurs in the playoffs and it was even a lesser version of this Spurs team, I remember, what year was that, Anthony? When
that
it
would
was
have been 2 years ago, 14.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember it was so compelling because you had this clash of styles, and it's something that Sam Presti has talked about a lot where, the Thunder were the athletic, aggressive disruptors. That was their roster. That was their talent base. And then the Spurs were more the beautiful basketball. And so rather than, always asking the question of why can't OKC play more like San Antonio, it was this display of, like, let's appreciate both styles and see them clash. But they were, at a different level. And honestly, a team like the Warriors didn't exist that year. And the Spurs weren't even as good as they are this year. So I just don't know if that formula is going to work. We got a few months to wait and see. But, I think they're going to be up against it.
Yeah. I think their hope is they get 2 months of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook at their best. They have to play superstar status. You need Serge Ibaka to find himself a little bit.
Sure.
Enes Kanter, I don't know how much you've been following the 5-game win streak or how they're playing since that West Coast trip. But Enes Kanter is playing the best basketball of his career as far as his defense has gone from facepalm bad to serviceable, not making 4 to 5 plays a game.
Steal that expression. I like that.
Not playing 4 to 5 plays a game where it's just giving up layups.
Right.
He's trying, and then that has translated to him playing more minutes and just putting up monster numbers, shooting 70%. Great free throw shooter. At one point, he hit 25 straight free throws, and he gets fouled a lot inside. Scoring a ton. Really good with Russ and Kevin, and now they're staggering, which gets him more minutes with those guys. I think that's a good development for them. Adams is coming along. That's a 22 and a 23-year-old center, Kanter and Adams. So, but again, that may be the biggest problem with this team is their depth and their youth is at the center position, but that is when you're playing the Warriors, you almost got to take those guys off the floor, and then you got to dip into your wing depth, which is not quite as deep on the Thunder.
Yeah, but if you're good enough down low, and you can go. I know. The other day the Spurs brought Tim Duncan off the bench, but that was mainly a product of the Warriors not having Bogut. You can go the big route if your bigs are good enough. And I'm with you on Adams and Kanter, and I had been watching Ennis' stretch. I think he's making a pretty decent push for Sixth Man of the Year. I think that's going to get interesting because it seemed like Jamal Crawford had that all wrapped up, but the Clippers had taken a slide back, and the Thunder are playing well, and Ennis is doing his thing.
Let's talk about that quick. Iguodala, who's in that conversation?
Well, I thought that Iguodala was going to be the guy early on, and I thought that it was going to be a very modern day sixth man award from the standpoint of you were really going to have to dive deep on the numbers to appreciate what he did. Their second unit was so dominant early on, and not even early on, like the first half plus of the season. But as time has kind of worn on, for one, his injury, I think, matters. He's been out for a minute.
Yeah.
He's still going to be out for a minute. And so narrative matters as you get to the end of the regular season. Are you helping your team surge forward, or are you not part of it because you got a bad break like an injury? With him, it's the latter. I just think his numbers at a certain, there's this threshold, right, where the analytics are being more appreciated than ever. But, if a guy winds up with 6 points and 5 boards, things like that, it just is a little too tough to swallow. And then Jamal had this great narrative, right, where Blake Griffin got hurt and everybody on the Clippers had to step up. And Jamal was one of those guys with J.J. Redick and Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan. Jamal was, without him, they would not won nearly as many games as they did. But now they've been sliding, and they're not playing nearly as well. And I feel like Ennis has kind of come into that power vacuum a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with Ennis because I think the numbers would, very much, paint him as the sixth man of the year. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's, he's only averaging 20 minutes a game, but he has 20 double-doubles this season off the bench. You mentioned injuries. He's played literally every game. I think, all 71 games coming off the bench, has all those double-doubles. Really surging right now. He has 6 double-doubles this month. He's averaging 15 and 10 in 21 minutes this month, which is like incredible production. But you mentioned the modern view of this award. Well, the modern perception of Enes Kanter is empty numbers. Defense, look at the metrics, look at net ratings. They're better with Adams on the court because the defense is better. So that might hurt him, even though I feel, 5 years ago, he's probably the runaway for this award.
Yeah, I mean, but that's if the Iguodala perception is, if it gets to a point, and I just cheated to pull up his numbers here. So you're talking 7.3 points, 4.1 rebounds, 3.4 assists. I just don't see it. I think the narrative with the Warriors, it's gotten so loud around Steph Curry and Draymond Green. So as their greatness has been kind of the credit for it has been doled out, I don't think enough of it is going to Iguodala this season to get him that award. So the two-way thing doesn't matter with him. Jamal Crawford's not considered a two-way player. Even though they've got good defenders like Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, they're consistently a middle-of-the-road defensive team. So, Enes and Jamal, to me, are in the same boat on that front. You're right. You've got a loud chorus of critics on Enes that feel like it's just not helping you win basketball games. But there's that chorus has to get quieter when they're winning basketball games and he's putting up big numbers. That's all there's to it.
Because he's like one of the main reasons for this recent resurgence as far as 5 straight. I mean, he's completely outplaying Serge. Now he's been, he closed a couple games, just because Serge has played poorly. So you're right there, but that will be an interesting. I just feel like it's going to be tough for a lot of voters to get by what they've always thought of Enes Kanter. But he's not a starter. This is what his role is.
It's important too, and you're the expert on this. But hypothetically, if he won the award, and I've seen some of the comments recently from Kevin and Russ who have been advocating for him on that front. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the way Enes Kanter is perceived is going to be like the X factor in Kevin Durant's free agency. But I think the simple concept that the Thunder made this move and they paid him all that money, and then ultimately it was seen widely as a positive thing, as far as like any superstar player's level of trust in the organization, almost, independent of what happens in the playoffs, there's no way that's a negative thing. I think this award, in a very subtle way, if he was either to win it or just be right there and almost win it, it would be a positive on that front.
Yeah, just because, people can criticize some of the moves Sam's made, but as far as matching or not matching the offer this summer, once it got to the point where they had Enes Kanter through the trade and Portland had signed him to the offer sheet, it was either match him and have Enes Kanter on your roster or go out and have $2 or $3 million to sign Kendrick Perkins or, a Kendrick Perkins type. And now they have Enes Kanter and, say what you want about his defense, but he is probably right now is their 4th best player.
Yeah.
But okay. What
Hey, I'm going to throw one at you.
Okay.
You mentioned Serge, and you see things every single day. Serge, for me, that playoff series against the Spurs when he came back from the calf injury, that was for me the height of realizing that this guy can be an absolute game changer. And okay, Harden went off to Houston, and we know that story. But Serge as this just hellish defender, this guy who could cover so much space and then hurt you offensively. Serge at peak Serge has been, it's Serge pricing, so to speak, has been amazing. And I've always loved that part of his game.
Good name, too. Really good name.
You like that? Yeah. But you kind of alluded to it. What do you see from him this year and what's different? What's going on?
I think there's a combination of a lot of factors. Number one, looking at him, I just think his energy's down. Maybe he's declined a little bit athletically. This is stuff I've talked about a ton on this podcast and, written about a little bit too. But I think he's, some people age differently. I just think he's kind of an old 26, just with the life he's had as far as Congo to Spain to everything earlier. And then you got to remember he plays international ball every summer. These guys, Durant and Westbrook, they're 26, 27 years old, and Ibaka. Just think about all the games, all the miles they've put on over the years. I mean, these guys were going deep in the playoffs from the age of 22. So they do all of that. Then they play in the summer. They just I think are older than other guys that might be their same age. And then Ibaka relies heavily on athleticism. So if that declines a bit, his game declines. He doesn't seem to have those. He still has like blocks where he's going thumbs down and he times them well and gets them. But I think he had one on Klay Thompson out in the Bay that was really nice. But you don't see those like second jump blocks anymore where he used to. Like a guy would look like he was going up and Serge would like jump to block the shot and the guy would like dish it and Serge would land and immediately like jump right back up, like same leap basically and block that guy.
That's the guy that I miss. It's kind of killing me. I mean, I hate hearing this because I get you on the fatigue stuff, but there's a lot of dudes playing international ball. A lot of guys. I mean, he's 26. I mean, it's we've gotten used to seeing guys maybe start having a downturn at 28, 29. I mean, as you know, kind of the Thunder and elsewhere, the people think 27 is the prime, so to speak. 26 is pretty young to start having a decline. I mean, I hope we got another a resurgence, if you will, at some point.
Yeah. And then so that I believe one, and then factor, and then the other one is like, and I mean, I think you wrote about it differently, I'd say, but like you just did a Dwight Howard story, just about like big men and getting stretched from the hoop and them not mattering as much. Like he's guarding stretch fours all the time, which you're not blocking shots, you're not affecting the game as much, and like that is his number one skill. That is his number one impact on the game, is his rim protection. But he's away from the rim way more than he was even 2-3 years ago.
That's a good point. I mean, that is kind of like part of the Dwight Howard interview. That I didn't write this part; it was in the podcast, but. He's sitting there laughing about how Steph Curry's trying to turn all these centers into stretch fives. And he started talking about, even that expression that you've got guys out there that are 7 feet tall trying to hit threes. I mean, the game is changing, and I can see your point that maybe Serge's value as a result goes down a bit.
Well, I think defensively that's where his value goes down. The power forward. People talk about the center, but I think the power forward position is what's really changed. I mean. Yeah. Almost everyone wants a shooter there now. And, like, Serge is a shooter, but defensively, he has to guard shooters way more than he's ever had to. And then offensively, I think his biggest issue is, like, we talked about earlier Billy Donovan changing this offense. And, like, although some people just don't really see it enough because they just see, like, oh, here's an ABC game. There's 5 minutes left, and the Thunder are playing isolation. Like, no, this offense really has changed a lot, like, over the grand scheme of the season, over every game. And that just doesn't really fit Serge because he's not a flowing offensive type player who's gonna, he's trying more. He's had some moments this season where he did a pump fake dribble and he swung the ball. Like that's rare to see. But the problem is his flaws get highlighted in this offense because he's having to try to catch the ball on the move and like it's going right through his hand. Like he has bad hands. He doesn't catch the ball well, and he's not a free-flowing passer. Like he has to think about the pass before making the pass. It doesn't just come to him. And now that he's in an offense that isn't just pick and pop with Russell, catch from 16 feet, shoot his robotic jumper. You can just tell how he's not a really naturally skilled player. He's a guy who trained himself to be a good jump shooter. That's why his jump shot is literally the exact same every time. I'm not sure there's a player in the league that has as I guess mirror a jumper like every single time he shoots it.
Right.
Which is a good thing to have, but I just think it speaks to the type of player he is. So I think he's struggled with that. And like I said, that's why I think it's just a combination of all these factors. And that's why you see a guy like Enes Kanter is really good for this team because he runs the break. He makes incredible, like he's great at catching those Russell Westbrook like low bounce passes because Russell's passes are like, that's just his game. He's kind of wild, and he's gonna throw these like pocket passes that can be tough to catch. Where guys like Kendrick Perkins and Serge Ibaka in the past, those are turnovers. With Enes Kanter, they're like one hand stabs and he's finishing.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that's like a whole layout of what's gone a little wrong with Serge. And we say that, but what is he, like 4th in the league in blocks? He's still putting up
Yeah,
12 and 8. But you're right.
If he wasn't going to be that third star, then he needed to be something close to it. That's the thing to me. I wonder. There's a lot of moving parts here, but if Kevin sticks around, if Russ sticks around, I just wonder a couple of years down the line, who's playing that role? Is Serge becoming a role player? Is he still there? They need him and his impact, I think, to be at a high level to make that whole thing work.
They do, but that's also why the emergence of 22-year-old Adams and 23-year-old Kanter has been big.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, since this is your daily life, do you enjoy Steven Adams on a daily basis as much as I did when I was there?
Yeah. It's to the point where like I get people pleading me post game like interview Adams and post the videos. You have to.
I think we probably already had this discussion, but for your listeners, that I think it was the Warriors game. He did a scrum with a couple reporters and just a couple little sound bites that had me dying. As he said goodbye to the media group, he basically looked to make sure everybody was done. He's officially the only NBA player that has ended an interview scrum by saying, "Okay, salutations."
Yeah.
And then he walks off.
It's funny. He came over and said, that's what he does now. It's his new thing. Salutations. Yes. And I asked him about that. I was like, is that New Zealand thing? He's like, no, that's just me and my loser mates. Me and my loser mates say that. No, but he's great.
I'm trying to think what the other one was. He had one with, Leslie, who I'm sure Thunder fans know and love, sideline reporter and TV personality who's expecting, and he looked at her one day and he said, Leslie, when are you dropping? And she looked at him and said, dropping? What are you talking? That's what we call it, dropping.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's got all those little quirks, and then it's a really funny dynamic within the locker room because, he's become beloved by the team. Russell Westbrook immediately was drawn to him just because of how he's.
Yeah.
Russell Westbrook dressed up as him on Halloween.
Yeah.
Which was, by the way, that's one of the funnier pictures out there. Is Russell Westbrook dressed up as Steven Adams, standing next to Steven Adams, who's dressed up like Heath Ledger in The Joker, as the Joker, and like.
Right.
It's like he looks like a 7-foot Joker. You know what I mean, with the hair and just like, and he can get really into character.
Yeah.
So.
I love it. There's not enough old school in the league, and even just playing style wise, and I've had conversations with him about this. Just, his background and whether you're Australian or from New Zealand, it's that part of the world. It tends to breed a lot of pretty gritty, tough basketball players, and they always wind up in the debate about whether or not a guy's dirty. But he plays tough, and he makes life really tough on the guys that are battling with, just bumping around with him every single night. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, and more these new age centers, the Cousins of the world, like they're or Hassan Whiteside, like they're really bothered by that, like physicality, which makes what he does a skill because like he really throws guys off their games. I remember in the Miami game, it's funny when he came into the league, like he didn't do it on purpose. He was just being like, I need to be a rookie with high energy. I'm setting hard screens. I remember him even saying once, like, I was told, like, the NBA is really physical, man. You got to be watching out. So he's like, I came in thinking it was going to be really physical, and then suddenly now I'm, like, the most physical guy. He's like, I didn't really understand that. But, like I said, I think his first year he didn't really know what he was doing. He was just being physical. Now he's getting more mature. He's getting all this experience, and I think he's realizing I'm going to try to antagonize. Like there's that great meme or whatever of him and Hassan Whiteside, where Hassan Whiteside's kind of trying to elbow him out of the way, and he's almost like licking Hassan Whiteside's elbow. He's like putting his face into Hassan Whiteside's elbow just to bother him. And centers like that are so easy to bother that way. You know what I mean? They're like, hey, get out of my personal space, man.
Yep.
And he has he does not care about personal space.
We had a chat maybe it'll become like a playoff story that I write. You know how during the playoffs, it's you got to find a million different angles.
Yeah.
I've got an interview with him that I didn't really know if I would use it, but I enjoyed the heck out of it. But it was all about not only the way he plays, but kind of the question of dirty. But then beyond that, we got into this chat about like the art of not responding when you piss somebody off. And he was really interesting on that, where he just flat out said that, it irritates guys that he has got this ability to maintain his sense of calm when they're losing their minds. Like, they want nothing more than for him to react and get a tech and hurt his team. But he's got this pretty impressive ability to just stay steady, even though he's the one poking the bear. And then when the bear reacts, he just acts like nothing happened, and he's winning the mental battle.
Yeah. No, he's a really interesting player. Okay. Best to worst West Coast cities. I mean, you're a guy that travels. I guess you kind of more just travel to like the playoff cities mainly because you're going to see the good teams. But
right.
What? I mean, this will eventually get to your thoughts on Oklahoma City. But like, where do you, if you know you're going on that trip, where do you enjoy?
So we're talking quality of life.
What I mean, whatever. I there's people that say, hey, they hate Oklahoma City because there's not enough to do. But there's people that say, man, I love going there because I could just sit and work and it's calm. So I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with OKC. I mean, I don't get out there a ton. I've told a lot of people this. The playoffs become a little bit of a traveling circus with the media. You've got, whether it's beat writers or national people, you have a lot of the same folks who you're friendly with jumping from city to city. OKC, in terms of having a good time once you clock out, I've had some of my most fun out there in the playoffs where it had this, and this is a postseason thing, but because it's obviously, a smallish city, and because there's limited options late night when we're finally getting out of the arena, it created, and this is a few years ago, this fantastic dynamic where everybody would flock to the Skirvin bar to have a few drinks and get some food. And it was the only time in my career that I felt like I was a sports writer in the 60s, like where, you go to the bar and Charles Barkley is entertaining in the corner, and Steve Kerr is talking to people on the other side, and it was a who's who of the NBA. And it was, not necessarily players at all, but it was analysts and commentators. I remember Kawhi Leonard's mother was hanging out every single night down there. Just that's where they would get a bite to eat. And I'm all about simplicity, and in that regard, I don't have any problem with OKC. I mean, look at where I live. I enjoy the kind of slower pace, things like that. So no problems with OKC. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There's times when it's like, it's 1:00 in the morning. You just got done. It's tough to find some food, but that kind of is what it is. I've done a ton of LA time, and I do enjoy LA. To me, LA is one of those places that you've got to learn it. I didn't like LA for years as a beat writer because I would fly into the Burbank airport and I would go to the Staples Center and I would stay in the downtown area because when I was covering the Kings, I just, I was never going to be there for more than a night or two at most. And so to me, it was like this, it was like this urban jungle where I just didn't get to see the more beautiful sides of it. So once you learn about Manhattan Beach and Santa Monica and Laguna and even down in that part, LA is, is a place that I've spent a ton of time and enjoy it. But
what's been helpful for me, I mean, well, first of all, I'm from California and have been there a lot, so I guess I know it a little bit better. But the Thunder practice at UCLA, I think it's more of like to appease Russell Westbrook maybe. But,
sure,
we're always going on that campus and around, Beverly Hills and stuff. And, that might be the top campus in it's probably top 10 campus in the country.
It's gorgeous. I mean, you're dead on.
So just what the Thunder do kind of puts me as a beat writer in the areas that are cool to see. And then you go downtown, Staples Center, being at a Lakers game. LA's awesome.
I know I sound like a politician, Anthony. Like, I'm looking at the standings here to decide, like, I probably got to go the other way and say which cities I don't enjoy that much. I mean,
Well,
I'm not a Texas guy. I'll be honest. Like Houston's fine. Dallas is fine. I don't find spots there. I don't have a routine there. I don't go into those two cities knowing that, this is what I'll probably do when I get off work. Now, San Antonio, which I was just there a couple days ago, I'm a complete sucker for. I love it. Like I'm the weird guy that when the media throng, this will happen in the postseason, where sometimes a group of people will say, hey, we're going to get in the car and go to Austin, and everybody raves about how amazing Austin is with the music and the food. Like, I'm kind of going, no, I'm straight. I'm okay with San Antonio. Like, I'm going to go get some Mexican at Rosario's and
the Riverwalk's cool.
Well, and even like south of it, the Riverwalk's kind of worn on me, but there's that whole area south. Like, I'll stay at the Marriott Plaza, which is off the beaten path a little bit, and then you've got Rosario's and B&D's Ice House, and you can just go for a nice little stroll and get some good grub, and so San Antonio is good, but I'm not big on Dallas or Houston.
To me, if you have nice weather, I'm the kind of guy that just like enjoys any travel.
Sure.
Where, like I'm enjoying any part of most cities. I mean, I don't want. I guess like the traffic can change it, but I just don't want to be cold.
Sure.
Is usually my number one.
So you loved the All-Star game this year? Is that what you're telling me?
I was just a little. I wanted to see Toronto more. I'm actually going to Toronto this Sunday. So I'm a little bit more intrigued. I also racked up about $100 in what's it called, roaming on my phone in about 2 hours, and that was a mistake. That was a rookie move. But
don't feel too bad, man. I almost did that. I actually changed my cell phone plan like the second I got off the phone, and that's a pet peeve. I hate to sound like a complete media diva, but like that was almost enough to sour me on the Toronto experience at All Stars, just because we're wired. This is a social media world. Even the job expectations, you're kind of expected to tweet, and we're even doing a lot of Snapchat these days and things like that. And all of a sudden, like, you were on this data lockdown where you can't communicate all that much with the outside world at an event, which is tailor-made for that kind of thing. So that was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it's weird. You almost feel like, or at least I did, it was like I was hopping base to base. I was like trying to find the next wireless port.
Right.
My phone's in airplane mode. But, okay, the topic we've actually probably gone way too long without discussing is kind of like Kevin Durant, free agency, everything surrounding him. First, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to take me through that. You're one of like the few national guys that I think has gotten a lot of really good, informal time with Kevin. You mentioned the sit-down feature you had with him. What would that have been? The year after his MVP, before his foot surgeries? Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
That would have been the summer. I remember.
That was going into last year.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I remember the day you got the sit-down interview or what, with him, because I remember you were at that. You mentioned it was at the state capitol.
Yep.
Mary Fallon, the governor, was there. I think they were doing like some kind of Get Fit campaign. For some reason, the image I have is like there was like a broccoli. There was a mascot. There was a big broccoli that was like dancing around. It was like a really weird scene.
I don't even remember that part. I remember Kevin dancing on the steps of the Capitol with the Get Fit people and the mob scene. I mean, if you go back and look at the story, there's still, honestly, easily the coolest Instagram video that I've ever posted. It was inside the car with Kevin, so he's sitting to my right, and I felt like I was, traveling with Michael Jackson, because the kids were literally like their hands and fingers and screams were coming through the top of the window in the Suburban. He was trying to put the window up without actually cutting somebody's finger off. I mean, it was a ton of love for him and a pretty crazy scene.
Well, tell me about that. Was that like probably the most time you got with him in as far as like in those one of those settings?
Yeah, I think so. In a one-on-one setting, for sure. I mean, it was, and it was one of those things where I kind of just tagged along for the event, but there was good color in terms of just getting a sense of things. And certainly the theme at the time was, and and this goes back to our media discussion. I don't think there's any reason not to be transparent about it. I mean, if you're the Thunder, you look at a media opportunity like that and you say, we could send a powerful message about Kevin being invested in the community, about Kevin caring about the people of Oklahoma, and what better way when he's spending time with the governor. And I think that was part of the incentive. And again, just the fact that we've got a good relationship. But so it was tagging along for that event and just kind of being a fly on the wall. And then when we got back to his place downtown, it was just basically chopping up in the car for, I think it was, 30, 35 minutes in terms of the actual on record interview. So he was good. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. Like, my lasting takeaway is, as the conversation went longer, and it was near the end where I had brought up his decision to not play, to leave Team USA camp in that couple months prior in Las Vegas, which was controversial. He had the shoe deal situation going on at the time, and he took a few hits on it. And I remember I asked him about some of that criticism, and that's when he kind of shifted into, I don't give an F mode, and he decided to just share his real thoughts. And that realness for me was what made the story, because it's just not a side of him that at that time we had seen all that often.
Yeah, I don't know if it sparked him, but like he's kind of been like that more and more the last couple seasons.
Right.
Which sometimes it comes off as like, he says something directed at the media, but I really do think it's good. It's interesting. He's more honest than he's ever been. But anyway, since then, he had the 3 foot surgeries. They had the disaster season last year. Scott Brooks gets fired. Donovan's in. Everyone knows how this season's going. And like the 2 mountains that are in front of them. Free agency. As I mentioned, I mean, more than most national guys, I think you know him. You kind of know his people a little bit better. Where are you right now, like gut feeling wise? I know you're with me as like he hasn't made his decision, he doesn't know. Right. So how can we sit here and say like we know? But like, where are you feeling like you're at with him?
I mean, the one thing I feel confident like saying that is going to play a part, and this is going to sound like I'm stating the obvious, but I'm not, is his like the degree to which he cares about winning a championship. And all I mean by that is like the idea that, I don't know who a good example is, but like there have been free agency superstars who you looked at and you said, no, they're not going to this situation because that doesn't involve enough individual shine combined with the possibility to win a championship. Like there's this formula, right, where you feel like the Warriors thing and that narrative and the idea that maybe Kevin goes to Golden State, in a lot of years and for a lot of free agents, the Warriors would probably be off the table because it would be like, wait, you're going to just kind of jump on the bandwagon? I mean, that would be the negative.
Yeah. How I've always put it is like that's not a move that a 28-year-old Kevin Durant makes. That's a move that a 35-year-old Kevin Durant makes.
Right. And I hear you, but I do admittedly wonder. I had a player tell me, and not to get all cagey, but I'll put it this way.
An anonymous player.
Right. An anonymous player and a guy who has won a championship tell me that, because I had this specific debate with him about, from the player community, how would it be perceived to have Kevin join the Warriors? And he said, it was almost like it was in the context of LeBron, where he said, man, when it comes to you guys, meaning the media, he's like, y'all are not going to shut up until this man wins a title. And when he does, it's not going to matter how he got it. And, I don't know if I agree or not, but I thought that was an interesting point, that concept that players might look at it and say that, that you can try to put an asterisk on it all you want, but a title is a title, and it certainly beats having to beat Charles Barkley and hear every night on TNT how you never won one. That desire to avoid that.
And one thing with Kevin, even more than most players, like he reads, he listens, he'll turn on First Take, he'll listen to what Barkley's saying on TNT.
Right.
He'll read not only stories about him, but he'll read and listen to opinions about Scott Brooks and get mad when people rip on Scott Brooks, get mad when people rip on his friend Kendrick Perkins or talk about his point guard. Like, he is very aware of the narrative out there, and I think it bothers him, and he wants to change it. I mean, you've seen it through some of his.
He's always been that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He in like more like a lot more guys than people realize are like that, because my thing has always been like, if somebody was just like talking to you about your job and then going home and writing about you and how you did your job, like you'd read it. Like, why wouldn't you read it?
Man, I just peeked at my Twitter mentions like 5 minutes ago, and somebody was killing me. And
yeah,
and I'm admittedly thin-skinned sometimes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, and even if they're right, like even if you wrote poorly that day, and like, and they wrote properly that you wrote poorly that day, just like if Kevin Durant writes or has a bad game and somebody writes about it, like that would still kind of get you mad. Like, man, why does this guy gotta say that about me, even though it might be true? So,
funny, real quick, Anthony. Funny side story. I don't think you and I ever talked about this, but this is years ago, like really early, with Kevin and Russ being a dynamic duo, and the Thunder playing the Warriors. There's a guy named Matt Steinmetz who used to do sideline reporting for Comcast, and he's still in the Bay and a prominent voice. So Matt was doing TV hits on the sideline at Oracle Arena, and he's on the air saying something to the effect of, the Thunder are in town tonight, and yet again the question is, are Kevin and Durant and Russell Westbrook getting along? And it was kind of an anti-Russ slant. Kevin literally waited for the guy's TV hit to end, and then kind of tapped the guy in the shoulder and just asked him to help him understand why that's a story and what would make him say that. Like, and it was in a very non-aggressive, inquisitive way. And the guy Matt walked away at the time going, this young guy is remarkable. But I think over time, that kind of polite prodding of the media maneuverings has evolved into like a stronger opinion about how the media works. And clearly at times he's a guy who doesn't like the way that it kind of functions. And I don't blame him for parts of it.
Well,
but,
the parts I really don't
that.
blame him are like the small comments that become huge blog posts, or the comments within let's say he did a 35-minute sit down with you, and like it's this whole like wide ranging story that has like a broader context, and within it he said something like, yeah, in my mind I'm better than LeBron James, or something like that. Right. Then the real story becomes SportsCenter, blog posts everywhere is like, Kevin Durant, I'm better than LeBron James.
I know, man. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. Yeah. I mean, not to go too far down this road, but that part drives me nuts. Like, I just did this big Dwight Howard thing, right? And like, I chose to write an angle about how the big man is dying, and Dwight wants the ball more, but he understands the game is changing. But we had the whole interview on the podcast, and I keep retweeting my own podcast, admittedly, because there's like that part of me going, gosh darn, like, people are not going to take the 30 minutes to listen to the whole interview, but I wish they would, because then you could have a fair opinion about the guy. But that's not going to happen. Everybody's busy. They see headlines, they see the clickbait, they click on it, and that ends up being, for the fans, at least a lot of them, what sticks out in their minds.
Yeah. Okay, quickly. If you had to say, like, if you had to guess right now, where's Durant play next year?
I'll still fall back on the OKC thing.
The 1 year deal.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want him to tell me if I've missed it. Like, I want him to truthfully answer the question about the 1 year deal, and I don't mean to imply that he's
you haven't
been lying.
missed it. He's just kind of been like, I'll think about it when I think about it. I haven't really thought about that. When, like, I mean, financially,
somebody's not doing their job if you hadn't thought about it. So, which means I know for a fact he's thought about it. But that one. But I also, and this is a question he's not going to answer. I don't know, man. Like, I know this is easy for me to say as a non-multimillionaire, but like, at what point is money, and at what point is it exhausting for him to even think about the idea of going through this again next season?
Yeah. Well, I think that at times is overrated, because he's not getting peppered with it every day, and like, especially when he's in Oklahoma City, like, there's just not that much media around. Like, I'll ask. A couple people will ask about it if there's like a rumor out there, but it's not like completely weighing him down every day.
Man, you've sparked the cycle a couple times. And I'm not. Well, I mean, and I know that's been a little bit of a talking point on your side of things, but like, it is funny how, I'm not gonna lie, like that one story you wrote about how no one's talking about Kevin's free agency. Like guys like me, and this is what, like 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago.
It was in January for sure. I remember. They were in New York. It was during the snowstorm in New York.
Like I remember reading it and going, wait a minute, like what are we doing? We're not doing our jobs. Like let's go, let's talk about this stuff. But it's the Warriors and how amazing their story has been, and the Spurs being so good. I mean, you're right. I mean, all in all, and it's not been too bad for Kevin.
Yeah, I just think I don't think that's the deciding factor where he can't look and say there's $30 million on the table, potentially like $30 extra million if he goes back into free agency, and if he thinks this is the right move for him winning wise to try one more year with Russ, but not sign long term after that with the Thunder in case Russ leaves, but also leave himself open to go. Like if that's the right move, I don't think he'd say, but I don't want to answer free agency questions again, so I'm not going to do that.
I hear you. But, I mean, that does make a lot of sense. I mean, you think about Billy Donovan and the opportunity to get another year learning him and deciding what you think of him. Even Enes Kanter, guys like that. Like, is this fit going to work? How much better is Enes going to get? How much better is Steven Adams going to get? Because he doesn't want to turn around having changed teams and then look at those guys as players and say, oh, man, they really took a jump the year after I left, and who knows what we might have been able to do. I mean, it does make a lot of sense to do the 1 year deal.
And it gives him a chance to allow other teams to have an extra year to figure out what they have as far as, like, maybe he's thinking, like, oh, the Lakers would be awesome, but, like, I'm not sure what Russ will be yet. I don't know what draft pick they're going to get. Like, let's give them another year to develop. Let's see how Porzingis in New York, like, all these teams that can potentially get him, like that just gives them another year to find themselves, either eliminate themselves by going down a bad path or, prop themselves up by like making some proper moves in a year.
Right. I agree. The Warriors thing though would scare me if I was in their shoes. And I mean, Harrison Barnes is, like if you look at his numbers, it's just like, oh geez, as great as they are, like it's amazing that a team that wins at the rate that they've won at has, like, you can pick them apart and see like a real opportunity to get better by having a better small forward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that part, it's not like he'd be replacing an all-star caliber player. I mean, Harrison has been a good fit, but he's not the impact player that Kevin would be.
Quickly with with everything with Durant, and you sat down with him a ton of times. I think you have a good handle on him and who he is. Have you ever sat down with Russ? Like Russ so rarely does. He did a long sit down with Lee Jenkins last year, and it turned into a really good story. But like, how much history do you have with Russ?
So, comparatively, I feel like it's a decent amount for national guys. We did something last year where it was kind of about how savvy he was in the business world and some of those types of topics. And like you said earlier, if he doesn't want to do it, he won't do it. This one he agreed to do. So, and this was in Sacramento.
If you mention fashion, his interest suddenly peaks.
But I don't listen, man. I'm not against a win-win. Like,
I'm with you.
If I'm not genuinely interested in it, then I'm not going to waste a guy's time. I was fascinated by this guy who could snarl in front of all the cameras and have that image, and then turn around and like resonate in the fashion business world. It's pretty interesting. So we did that chat. I've met his brother a couple times, and and
his brother's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been. I mean, he and I feel like we get along reasonably well. He's respectful. When I was out there last time, and you remember when he and I don't think any of us wrote about this because it was kind of a weird situation, but like when Russ kind of made this weird comment about having to wait and see how Billy fit as a coach, and it was just a weird soundbite that we didn't know what to make of.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of sitting there as a national guy saying, hey, I was talking to the Thunder saying, I have no interest in writing stuff out of context, but if this is what he truly said, that's newsworthy. And then Russ, to his credit, agreed to circle back and have a chat to clarify what he meant. And actually, none of it ever saw light of day because it just kind of wasn't relevant anymore. But like even his willingness to do that and not be irritated by it and realize that maybe something he said was misconstrued. I mean, you know what you're getting with him post game, man. Like especially if they lose.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to be insightful. I mean, sure, do I get defensive for my colleagues sometimes if he's biting people's heads off? And more of that in the past, I think. Sure. I mean, I think you got to comport yourself a certain way. But
he's not hard to deal with if you know what you're getting.
Right.
And you don't go in with like notion that he's gonna be like Kevin or he's gonna be like this guy or that guy. Like, no, you just need to know who he is and like what you're looking for, and he's easy to deal with.
I mean, and for me, there's always two layers to that discussion. How you act in those settings. Sometimes we forget how awkward those settings are. In fact, even before we jumped on this podcast, I heard you guys talking off the air about that thing. You're changing your clothes. You're in their space. All these things. So to me, there's two layers of it. How do you act when the cameras are on, and how are you doing on that department? And then just the question of, like, do I think you come off as an okay person? And I do absolutely think that Russ comes off like a good guy. And I've seen him interact with you guys away from the mics where there's a good way about him. This was my favorite recent Thunder moment, and I brought Leslie up earlier. This cracks me up. He's like the maternity coach for Leslie in the locker room, where he's asking her, like, did you get your walk in today? Are you eating right? He's showing this real human concern as she forms a human child, it was kind of adorable in a weird way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got a softer side. We just don't see it all that often.
No doubt. All right, Sam, I've probably already held you too long. So,
no worries, brother.
All right, Thunder Spurs second round. Spurs?
Yeah, I'm not betting against that group. I mean, especially LaMarcus Aldridge showed me a lot in that last Warriors game, and I went out there for that game, and 26 points, putting it to him in a big-time game. I mean, if he finds a way to meet this moment and really become part of what the Spurs are doing.
And he's killed the Thunder in the past, especially in Portland.
Yeah.
Is that matchup scarier for San Antonio than people realize or not?
It goes back to Serge, man. To me, Serge is the Spurs killer. I just don't know if it's the same Serge.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he's got to play out of his mind. I mean, I want to see the guy that is out there, just like a madman, not the guy that – I mean, part of me is scouts kind of poisoned the well on me a little bit with Serge this year, where I did a piece talking to some scouts about him. And, there was a lot of folks saying that he didn't focus on defense like he had in the past, and he was in love with the mid-range or the three-point ball. And, and I try to watch him closely enough to get my own opinion. But if guys who watch this game every day are saying things like that, that's not a good sign.
No doubt. All right, Sam. Again, I appreciate it, and all the listeners I'm sure do as well. So we'll probably talk to you maybe playoff time. You going to be out here at all?
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know the schedule, but, I mean, it's going to be either Warriors, Spurs, Thunder, Clippers is going to be the focus. I mean, depending on how things go. But I don't think I'm coming before the regular season. I think we're going to shut it down a little bit, and then we're going to have to go say our goodbyes to Kobe as he calls it a career.
You know what? You know where Kobe's last road game is?
Is it OKC?
It is in Oklahoma City, April 11th.
There you go. Shoot, I got to look at that. It's a good idea.
Yeah. And then first round, I think might be Thunder Blazers. That might be the most interesting first round series in the West.
It would be. I'm admittedly kind of rooting for the Blaze. I don't have the standings in front of me, but I'd be just fine, like we saw last
Blazers,
night with
Warriors?
Thunder Rockets, and then no, not Blazers Warriors. I think if I would love San Antonio Portland.
Oh, because of Aldridge.
Yeah, you got a good story. I mean, I'm a sucker for storylines, and both of those would be,
no doubt,
familiar faces. If you have Harden and playing the Thunder, that would be fun. So
you know
how
much of a panic this city would be in if the Rockets went up 1-0 and there was a chance James Harden and the Rockets could end the Kevin Durant era. This place would.
I don't know, man, and I don't know how much they. I mean, who knows? But I know we're kind of done here, but I don't know how much they need to worry about the Houston thing.
No, I mean, I don't think that team's that good. I think that would be like a 4 or 5 game series.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks again, and everyone else, we'll talk to you again next week.
You got it, brother. Thanks, man.
Durant pull-up jumper off the rim, and the Thunder win! All right, come on, let's sing the Thunder song. When you hear the sound of thunder, don't you get too scared. Just grab your Thunder buddy and say these magic words.